We've talked about technology and people and how we use it, and now we're going to look at a little bit with our panel today in this first session about data and data sharing. What are the benefits and challenges of sharing even cross inter-organization, the data sharing? The challenges and benefits for us. The actual session's entitled Growing Smarter and Safer Together. I'd like to introduce and welcome Elena Vasichenko, the Director of OSS Business Systems and Performance at IATA, and Elena will lead and moderate the session and introduce the group. Elena, welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Is my mic? Showing up in great numbers today. Monica, the party was a success. It's my first IGHC, actually. By show of hands, is anyone a newbie here? A few of you. My best impression is the ground handling crowd can dance. So over the past 2 years, and actually we've been growing data sharing programs in IATA. We have been discussing here in these last 2 days the challenges that our industry faces, as well as the strategies that we could deploy to address those. Starting from attracting and recruiting top talents, going to optimize and harmonize additional ground handling standards, and all the way to digitalization and full automation of our processes. But one thing is for sure, neither of these strategies can be implemented successfully without us facing the challenge of timely access to reliable data and not fragmented data on top of it. So in this context, can interorganizational data sharing help us all to find new efficiencies in our processes, cut costs, and perhaps even build new business models centered around customer, around safety, around sustainability? We at IATA believe yes. And a lot of airlines support us in that by participating in global aviation data exchange programs that we run, of which perhaps the most relevant here to mention is IDX, Incident Data Exchange. In the past 2 short COVID leap years, we call them, we've managed to grow this program from its start in early 2020 to over 220 participants by now. But an interesting fact about it is that it's open not only to airlines, it's open to all of the participants in commercial aviation value chain. And today we invite a group of colleagues, our industry partners, to discuss what are the challenges as well as the benefits of sharing the data among ourselves. Please, let me invite to the stage Peter Hunt, Senior Manager, Health, Safety, Security, and Environment Data Management with WFS. Hi, Peter. Francesco Bertaccini, Head of Safety Services at SEA Milano Airports. And Manuel Van Asch, Principal Consultant at the company called Zero G, which is a subsidiary of Lufthansa Group that is focused solely on data collaboration and artificial intelligence in aviation. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
So let's jump into it. Peter.
Hello.
Working for WFS, which is one of the leading ground handling companies in the world, spanning over 167 locations in over 20 countries. What are some of the potentials that you can see, and maybe even current real benefits from data sharing with other stakeholders in those locations, and even globally?
Sure, okay.
Morning, everyone. So it's an interesting challenge, data. Obviously, sharing data is a good thing. We can all learn from the data that comes in. With such a big organisation such as ours, spread over many countries, lots of different stations, there's challenges in collecting that data. But some of those benefits, when you start analysing the data, and you can really kind of start to understand some efficiencies around process and people and things like that. It's important that you understand and you measure the key KPIs, and I think it's those KPIs that can be shared with the wider audience, with the airports, with IATA, with the groups that will all kind of bring us together.
So could you name a couple of examples? Like, do you do data sharing, even maybe within your group or with other stakeholders, with other GSPs or airports?
So there's various different ranges of data sharing. So obviously within the organisation itself, then with the regulators, through mandatory reporting programs. So they get the important reports. Then through programs like the IATA Data Exchange, we participate in the ACS SID program, which is collecting damage data. So it's been around for a couple of years now. It's growing. So there's sharing with that. And then with airports as well. So we provide details, incident events to airports. But it's all very fragmented. It's little bits to different organisations. And what really needs to come together is an umbrella over all of that and pull it together.
Thank you, Peter. And you actually made a very good segue towards the airports. So Francesco, coming from the airport environment, I think you're in a unique position of working with multiple customers. Of course, passenger is the customer for all of us, but then there is freight forwarders, there is ground service providers, there's airlines that are your customers as well. Could you give us some examples of maybe your data sharing ecosystem in the airport and how you benefit from it?
Yes, thank you, Olena. Good morning, everybody. As an airport, we have an helicopter view of all the operations existing in our boundaries. The potential benefit of sharing data is improving the operations and improving punctuality, also for customer experience, which are our main customer and leading the economics of the system. Improving their experience means also improving operations, and safety is always embedded into the system. What we do is we just started a program called Operator Safety Level Chart. Means that we collate data coming from the GSR, the ground safety report we receive daily. We have a database of about 1,500 reports per year. Then we add the safety observation we do during daily to-do activities. So we have a database of about 15,000 observations per year, and driving behavior report. Altogether, they are associated to each organization, and so we can go back to the organization and say, okay, these are your data, these are your performance in our boundaries, in our airports. How would you manage them to improve, to raise the bar in your efficiency? If we are able to have a benchmark with all the airports in our cluster of activity and passengers, it's going to be an additional benefit, raising the bar additionally. So we have a one-to-one meeting with those organizations when we dig each point, and then we have a regular community meeting once a month, the safety committee. We present data to them, but of course they are de-identified because we can't go too much into the privacy of each organization.
Thank you, Francesco. So now on to you, Manuel. You're coming from a Geeks World, data, artificial intelligence, and I know that Zero G is doing a lot of collaboration among different stakeholders. Peter and Francesco, they mentioned something that's been historically a growing trend in our industry, which is data sharing around safety first, and then lately we're also going into operational efficiency seeking and sharing data for operational optimization purposes. But I'm curious, do we already have some collaboration starting around sustainability challenge?
Yeah, so thanks, Olena, and good morning, everyone, as well from my side. I think sustainability is not a completely new topic. It feels that way every now and then, but you mentioned already like operational efficiency. I think the big upside of our industry is that everyone's driving operational efficiency that then also leads to a more sustainable operations, right? I think that the one thing that is, or like the one thing that we try to like do that as well is for the Lufthansa Group, we've created the entire operational suite and really understand at the different hubs and the different stations what's driving inefficiencies and making suggestions on how to tackle these inefficiencies to make sure that you do not have any waste. Or do not board any additional catering stuff on the aircraft that you might not need, right? So you're working together with our caterers. I do think that the really thing that is completely new is the electrification of everything that's happening on the ground. So electrical pushback trucks and stuff like that. We need to work more closely together as an industry to make sure that we can make that transition. Because only through data we can understand exactly when to operate what electrical pushback truck where, how long it can go on for, and when it needs to be recharged, and how effective it is, and go from the transition from where we are today towards a carbon neutral future. 2030 is the ground neutral future for ground operations at the Lufthansa Group, so data is the only way to make sure that we can also actually account for that goal.
Good to hear that. Well, sounds like we all agree that there's a lot to be gained from sharing data and collaborating around in the data space. But we know the truth on the ground is not the reality. You mentioned, Peter, it's quite fragmented, right, the data sharing initiatives. And even we know for a fact from IATA data sharing programs like IGHC that only a fraction of the information that's being generated by industry stakeholder actually gets captured in our data sharing programs, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the data capture. And just to give you an example, our program was open from the get-go, from 2 years ago, to participation for ground service providers, and until now we count only 23 GSPs in members of our programs. We're of course looking to increase those numbers, as well as perhaps the airport's participation as well, because I think we all can gain from it, we agree. So, but the uptake is not very fast, and hence it's reasonable to say that there are barriers to it, either perceived or real barriers. So I would like us to spend a little bit of time on maybe discussing how you see what are the challenges for you to share the data with your partners. Who would like to jump in?
I'll go first. So from a ground service provider perspective, I guess it's some of the biggest challenges, I guess, when you have an incident occurring out on the ramp, typically there's an aircraft involved, there's an airline customer involved. So that incident doesn't just happen to the GSP, but it happens to the airline. The airlines, some of them are very willing for us to share their data, others not so much. Some are IATA members, some are not. So it creates a mix of some that are good and want us to share, and others that don't. So that's kind of one of the first barriers that we've got. It's not specifically, our data as in we own all of it kind of thing. There's the airline attachment to it. And then there's the data security piece as well. So, and it's not that we don't trust sending it to an organization. It's more around the risk of the data becoming identifiable, and then that identifiable data then getting into the wrong channels and then being seen in a bad way, and potentially losing customers or stuff like that. So a couple of challenges there really, and I think also going on from that, there's within our own organisations, we see differences in reporting. So some of our stations and hubs are really good at reporting. We've got really good reporting cultures. Other ones, not so much. So there's a disparity as well in our own data from the reporting levels, different cultures, different nationalities, the way reports are written. So some, a Rampage Agent A will write a report in a certain way, and Rampage Agent B will write it in a different way. And then we've got a team of about 20 people that would validate the reports and put descriptors on them. And the consistency level within those descriptors being applied to the data is also a challenge to get that right. So, we're doing stuff internally to kind of build up definitions and make that those data descriptors more relevant to our business. We took the IATA IDX descriptors. They probably covered about, 70% of what we do in the business, but then there's another 30% that's not covered. So I think there's some development needed to actually make the IDX descriptors more relevant to ground service providers. We're a big cargo handling operator. There's not much in the descriptors for the cargo operation side of things. So there's a gap there, and there's some risks there as well. So they're kind of...
I can relate very much to the challenge of collating and normalizing the huge data set. In global programs, we always face the challenge of multi-language, different reporting cultures, and so on. We try to tackle it, if I may share our experience with machine learning technologies, right? There's a lot of text analytics have been developed over many years, but even there, the aviation jargon needs special embeddings and special lexicon, right? The runway is not the same in fashion as in aviation, so we're working with our partners to try to improve it, and in fact, we're trying to put out, perhaps in a couple of years, an open source solution that allows better alignment for this, reports and labeling of the reports. Yeah. So I hear from you, Peter, you mentioned basically 3 main reasons. Lack of perhaps clarity on IP rights for data, to be able to share, the fear or perceived lack of security perhaps around shared pod, right? And lack of standardization and taxonomies.
Correct. Yeah.
Is there anything else you can share with us?
Yeah, I would go again with the standardization, because also for EPO point of view is something really important. Because when you go to aggregate data all across every organization, we can see also internally that sometimes we have differences. I would like to make the example of runway incursions. Runway incursion is one of the top item of the aviation world, and the standard classification was, the common in use now, was about A to E based on the location of the aircraft in the runway. And now, after years, Eurocontrol started a new initiative, then followed by the Flight Safety Foundation, a very good initiative, making a new standard. But at the moment is only a standard, it's not mandatory. So some organizations use the new standard, which is risk-based, is really enhanced, is very good, but someone is still using the old one, which is the mandatory one. So when you go down to the end and you compare data in between the organization, also at the airport level, and on one specific SPI, which is runway incursions, you have difference at the end within the data. I got 5, you got 7. Where is the difference? Imagine what happens if we don't stop somewhere and we make standardization, because the number of difference start growing within the airport for all the SPIs, and then within the aviation community in the area, and then in the world, I would say. because data are the gold of our era, or our century. We collect data for everything, at home, at work, for everything, but we have to standardize them to be able to compare and to work and to raise our safety bar for the efficiency of our system curves.
Yeah, so sounds like standardization is a challenge not only for ops folks, but for data folks as well. It's a challenge that we have to learn to face together. Thank you for sharing, Francesco. Now, Manuel, sounds like there are some very concrete barriers, and will maybe take a little bit of time to get on with effective and basically voluntary data sharing. Are there any other ways, like besides just sharing data in a raw format that seems to be a challenge for some of the participants? Are there any other ways that we can collaborate, perhaps around research, machine learning, that to address some of these challenges, yet still progress together?
Yeah, for sure. I think the beauty of our industry, and we've seen that, we talked about like yesterday and the day before about like recruiting millennials and making sure that people get to join our industry. During the COVID period, a lot of my colleagues decided, well, in aviation, nothing's going to happen for the next 2 years, so they wanted to work for a startup. They came back because the aviation industry, for machine learning people, there is nothing more cool, there is not more interesting data that's like basically untapped for a large extent than the aviation industry. So I think it's a very beautiful and very awesome, awesome thing that we can work with. I think like before we talk about data sharing, really the big challenge that we see is getting access to the data. So a lot of like legacy databases are built up that maybe one person within the entire organization knows how to operate and extract the data that then like a data engineer has to clean. And then if you've done all of that work, then there is like a hesitation to share that. Right? I think that's a little bit the story that you try and like capture as well. And one of the ways that we can start working with that is like anonymizing data more at the source. So adding more noise into the data so you do not have any of the IP issues or the data privacy issues. Or you take a federated learning approach where you run multiple models decentralized and then extract that information on an aggregated level, and then you can share that with your partners, right? So there are multiple ways how you can like apply machine learning again to anonymize data or add noise, or take a federated learning approach to make sure that your IP is protected, your GDPR issues are protected, and we can still work closer together. But that kind of like level of maturity is very hard to have on a management level, I feel like sometimes. So like data engineers and machine learning people know what they're talking about. Also, thank God for the move towards cloud. So we don't have all of these on-prem servers to work with all the time anymore. But really the feeling that you're sharing information with your partners, that's a very, like that feeling to overcome that is very, very tricky every time. Every time it's a very tricky, like human process that on a human level, people have to trust each other before that data is shared, even if it's completely anonymized. Even if we completely anonymize all of the data, we work with very sensitive data. We completely anonymize that, and then still sometimes like, no, but it's our data, and we cannot share that. And then this partner has to also share their data, and then they have to, and then you have a big meeting with a good coffee and tea, and then you talk it through. And then you start with a small pilot, and then things like start rolling. But that level of trust is, you have to establish that on a human level. We're currently seeing that in Frankfurt with Lufthansa and Frankfurt Airport with this new initiative called FRA Alliance. We have very high hopes for that. We're not completely, as I said, it's more like a management topic, but they're like talking on management level on also how to share data more effectively for improved security processes, commercial opportunities, baggage processes that we all have to work with. And we want to work more effectively together. Yep. And that's going to be hopefully the future. And I think that's very promising. And that's really the push that we've seen in the last 2 years.
Thank you, Manuel. So sounds like you can't talk about data without talking about people's feelings.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe we need more events and dance-off parties.
Like yesterday, that worked very well. Again, like GDPR, don't make any videos or photos. That's like an important thing.
Got it. Us being a voluntary data sharing program, we have a privilege of our members sharing with us identified data. And of course, we had to build up quite robust systems and all the checks and balances to be able to guarantee that we harvest the insights from the data while protecting confidentiality. But I know that there's other programs, and well, our twin sister programs are in Europe is Data for Safety, right? And in United States is SIS. The difference of these programs from ours is that they are run by regulators with participation and oversight of regulators. And they cover a certain geographical area. So we started actively collaborating with both SIS and Data for Safety, and like just recently we issued a joint report with Data for Safety on skills gaps in the industry, which they have come to us with certain insights and ask us to validate whether it's true, whether it's true trend for the rest of the world, and we were able to validate that. But all of that started with what you, Francesco, mentioned, discussing the standards and definitions, because the way we measure things are different, so it takes time actually to come to a baseline that we all can share the insights from. So we don't have to share the data in a raw format. We can collaborate and effectively share insights. That's one of the ways. Something else we're exploring at IATA, and I don't know if any of you have this experience, we're trying to start collaborations with academia. So that, we think, goes a long way, because first of all, we raise awareness about our industry and the data sets we have with the growing talent out there, with mathematicians and statisticians. So that attracts newcomers. And the other thing is to get good insights and to get good algorithms and out of it, you need peer review. You need a lot of you can't just hire one data scientist and expect that a solution will come out of it. There needs to be a lot of real collaboration on multiple levels, and so we're experimenting with that. We don't have any concrete results coming out of it yet, but everyone learns in the process. Do you have any examples of maybe from your side of collaborating with universities or research consortiums?
Yeah, we work together very closely with universities as well. Recently, we did a project with the Lufthansa Technik and worked together on a computer vision, completely new approach towards training a computer vision algorithm. And it's always great because the professors also bring in new ideas or challenge us again a little bit. We're more on the practical data science, practical machine learning. It has to have an impact and an ROI as fast as possible, otherwise our customers get upset. And the university obviously has a little bit of a different angle. And we were very lucky enough to have the youngest student who graduated with 19 in physics, math and computer science working for 0G. So that's also another way. He was very bored during his studies, he said, so he wanted to do something cool with actual data. And so we said, well, the world is your oyster, come and join us. And so he worked with us now for the last 5 years during his studies, and that's been a fantastic exchange as well, because he's fresh, eager, and things move forward, and I think that's really the kind of stuff that we all need.
And it's great that we can offer this exciting opportunity to new talent. Yeah.
As long as the data is available.
Yes, as long as
otherwise he's just sitting around on his hands, which is not great.
Yeah. I think I'll pause here. I'm afraid I don't have the iPad with questions, so maybe if audience has any questions for the panelists, you go, please, go for it.
When an incident has happened, but it is not yet fully investigated, right? So you don't have the root cause, you don't have the other things around it. So what are you capturing initially is just this has happened, right? And sometimes the regulatory bodies, especially from the region that I come from, they actually say that without the investigation being closed, how are you going to share this data? Because it's going to give a very different interpretation till you have analyzed it. So have you faced any such challenges? And if yes, what can IATA do to overcome this challenge, as a body?
Thank you very much for the question. May I first refer to Francesco, I guess, as the head of safety.
Yes. Is a very good point. We usually, I bring my experience. We recently have an event that we need to investigate deeper than our standard ground safety report. We remain based on fact. What we have is solid data at the beginning. We share those data that are confirmed, and we do like Annex 13 is presented for accident investigation, the interim report at a certain point. We made blocks for the investigation because they are factual information, they are confirmed, they are a little bit of analysis beyond, and then can be shared. Shared with who? With only with the two interested parties at this point and with the authority. The full report is then released to the airport community once it's completely done, unless we have those that are normally called emergency recommendations that need to be implemented immediately to avoid further events. And so we spread only the recommendation and the topic without further analysis and background data at the beginning that will be transferred everything down into the final report of the analysis. This is our view, and this is the way we drive the data sharing at that point.
Thank you, Francesco. And just to finish off from IATA side, what we do, we try to capture the data as soon as possible. So a lot of this is coming out in public sources like Herald, Safety Foundation, and so on. We do grab that data, and it still has a value, even in advance of the full analysis. Sometimes it's a value of only showing a trend going up, right? We still can label that occurrence at the high level, let's say runway excursion. We don't know why, but it adds to the KPIs and the trends that we're showing that things are happening, which then with time gets analyzed for deeper why reasons and root causes. Yeah. Yes.
So in the GDDB challenge, at times we would face a situation that do we really need to enter this into the GDDB because it's not exclusively ground-based. Like there's a combination of factors typically in any incident. So now in this new way of going beyond, are we integrating all the flight ops and cabin and ground and everything together? Or are we still going to continue in the platform with STEEDS and GDDB? And like, what's new in the new thing that's coming?
Well,
what is the difference?
What's new? Thank you for the question. What's new in IGX is that we're integrating everything. There's no longer GDDB and STEEDS. IGX is a data sharing and information exchange platform for all spectrums of airline and aviation operation. We have now sections for maintenance and engineering, flight ops, cabin safety, ground. We have security, portion of the taxonomy dedicated to security occurrences. And that can go off in operational occurrences of any sort, in fact, doesn't have to be related strictly to safety. Whatever the community sees as of value to exchange on, we are able to accommodate for that exchange. Our most recent endeavor here is, for example, doing a better tracking of dangerous goods, specifically lithium batteries. And we've been learning, actually, working with our colleagues and with the industry, because we started off with having labels that are mostly occurring in cargo operation. And recently, as you can all see from the news, it gets more and more into cabin. So we're working now with our stakeholders in that area to add additional labels and additional taxonomy descriptors to be able to accommodate for tracking the instances of passengers bringing in lithium batteries into cabin and occurrences happening there. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. And I will be happy to chat with you afterwards as well. We're out of time. Are there any more questions in the audience? I apologize. Maybe I'll just grab one more minute to conclude with our panel. Maybe I just will ask you to give one concrete example of where you think, or a proposal, let's say, of where we can all move on from here. Like, what should we be doing? Let's say there are some bigger challenges that we can't overcome in the next year. But more concretely, however small it is, what is the step that we could be making towards better collaboration in the data area? Let's start with you, Manuel.
So from my perspective, it would be make it anonymize data at the source and then make it available to the industry or even to the public, and be amazed by what young people can come, or young people, old people, whatever people can come up with to solve the challenge that we're all facing. But really anonymize at the source and then make it available.
Thank you. Francesco?
Yes, from my point of view, is a discussion on how to use the data later, how to present the data, not following the standardization. The second part in delivering the proper and adequate to the aviation industry type of data and way to communicate them and its frequency. Because many times it's perceived, I move data towards an industry or an organization, but I want something back. Mm-hmm. And the frequency I need it, and the type of data is coming back.
Thank you. And Peter?
Yeah, so I think actually a little bit more targeted. So, you know, looking at the risks that we see in ground operations, and focusing in on them and having some targeted sharing with, you know, industry experts. So the data coming in is for a very specific purpose, maybe injury data. You know, we all face injuries out there on the ramp. So a very focused approach with you know, some real tangible outputs. I think the work Steve's been doing with the GDDB stuff and the IDX stuff on the GSE improvements, you know, a well-known risk, data collection, a new set of standards, GSE manufacturers coming to the party and producing new equipment, and then measuring that reduction in risk because of this new equipment. And I think if we take that same approach with injuries out on the ramp, we could have the same success there as well. So, yeah,
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So anonymization, driving value, and staying focused on concrete challenges. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
sharing your thoughts and experience with us today.